Nestled between the rolling hills of western Nigeria, where the lush green of the forest met the golden hues of the savannah, lay the village of Ilupeju. It was a place where time seemed to move at its own pace, where the rhythms of nature dictated the ebb and flow of daily life. The village was a tapestry of earthen huts with thatched roofs, their walls adorned with intricate patterns that told stories of generations past. At the heart of Ilupeju stood the marketplace, a vibrant hub of activity that pulsed with the lifeblood of the community. Here, under the watchful gaze of ancient baobab trees, villagers gathered to trade goods, exchange news, and weave the fabric of their shared existence. The air was thick with the mingled scents of ripe fruits, smoked fish, and aromatic spices, creating an intoxicating perfume that drew people from miles around. It was in this marketplace that our story begins, for it was here that a woman named Ayoka would rise to prominence, her ascent as swift and unexpected as a sudden storm over the savannah. Ayoka had not always been a fixture of the Ilupeju market. She arrived one balmy morning, her possessions bundled in a cloth slung over her shoulder, her eyes bright with determination and something else, a hunger that seemed to simmer just beneath the surface. She was neither young nor old, her age as difficult to pin down as the source of the enigmatic smile that played at the corners of her lips. The other market women watched with a mixture of curiosity and wariness as Ayoka set up her stall. It was a modest affair at first, a few yams, a handful of peppers, some palm oil in recycled bottles. Nothing to suggest the empire that would soon grow from these humble beginnings. "Where are you from?" asked Mama Folake, the self-appointed matriarch of the market women. Her voice carried the weight of authority, honed by years of haggling and settling disputes. Ayoka's smile widened, revealing teeth as white as fresh palm kernels. "Oh, here and there," she replied, her voice melodious and soothing. "I've traveled far and wide, but now I feel that Ilupeju will be my home." Mama Folake's eyes narrowed, not entirely satisfied with the vague response. But before she could press further, a customer approached Ayoka's stall, drawn by the newcomer's charismatic presence. "These yams," the customer said, picking up one of the tubers. "They look exceptionally fresh. How much?" "For you, my friend," Ayoka said, leaning in conspiratorially, "I'll make a special price. After all, it's my first day in this beautiful market." The transaction was swift, and the customer left with a smile and an armful of produce. It was the first of many sales Ayoka would make that day, each one executed with a charm and efficiency that left the other market women murmuring among themselves. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in vibrant oranges and purples, Ayoka counted her earnings. Her smile never wavered, even as she felt the weight of envious stares from neighboring stalls. She knew that this was just the beginning. That night, as the village settled into the quiet rhythms of evening, Ayoka sat alone in the small hut she had rented on the outskirts of Ilupeju. By the flickering light of a palm oil lamp, she opened a small, intricately carved wooden box. Inside, nestled on a bed of red cloth, lay an amulet, a simple leather cord from which hung a polished cowrie shell. Ayoka lifted the amulet to her lips, whispering words in a language long forgotten by most. The cowrie shell seemed to pulse with an inner light, and for a moment, Ayoka's eyes reflected that same otherworldly glow. "Soon," she murmured, replacing the amulet in its box. "Soon, this village will know the true extent of my power." As she prepared for bed, Ayoka's thoughts drifted to the native doctor who had given her the charm. She remembered the warning in his eyes, the tremor in his voice as he spoke of the price that came with such power. But Ayoka had dismissed his concerns. She was ready to pay any price for success, for the adoration of others, for the ability to bend the world to her will. Little did she know that in the shadows of her small hut, unseen eyes watched her every move. The spirits of the land, ancient and wise, sensed a disturbance in the natural order that Ayoka's presence brought. They whispered among themselves, their voices like the rustling of leaves in the night breeze. "She brings change," one spirit murmured. "Change is not always for the better," another replied. "We must watch and wait," a third concluded. "The balance must be maintained." As Ayoka drifted off to sleep, dreams of wealth and power dancing in her head, the spirits settled in for their vigil. The stage was set, the players were in motion, and the village of Ilupeju stood on the precipice of a transformation that would shake it to its very foundations. The weeks that followed Ayoka's arrival in Ilupeju were marked by a subtle but undeniable shift in the dynamics of the village marketplace. What had begun as a trickle of curious customers to her stall soon became a steady stream, and before long it seemed as though half the village was clamoring to buy from the enigmatic newcomer. Ayoka's stall, once a modest assembly of goods, now boasted an array of products that seemed to cater to every need and desire. Fruits gleamed with an impossible sheen, their colors more vibrant than any seen before. Vegetables remained crisp and fresh long past their natural time. Handcrafted items, baskets, pottery, and textiles drew the eye with patterns that seemed to shimmer and dance in the sunlight. But it wasn't just the quality of her goods that drew people in. There was something about Ayoka herself, an aura that seemed to radiate charm and allure. When she spoke, people found themselves leaning in, captivated by her words. Her laugh was like music, causing those who heard it to smile involuntarily, and her eyes, those who looked into them, often found themselves agreeing to purchases they hadn't intended to make, as if their very desires were being reshaped by Ayoka's will. Mama Folake, ever watchful, couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. She had seen traders come and go, had witnessed the ebb and flow of fortunes in the marketplace, but never had she seen success like this come so quickly or so completely. One afternoon, as the market bustled with its usual activity, Mama Folake approached Ayoka's stall. The younger woman was in the midst of wrapping a parcel for a customer, her fingers moving with practiced grace. "Ayoka," Mama Folake began, her tone carefully neutral. "Your business seems to be thriving." Ayoka looked up, that ever-present smile playing across her lips. "Indeed it is, Mama Folake. The people of Ilupeju have been most welcoming." Mama Folake's eyes narrowed slightly. "Yes, they have. Almost. Too welcoming, one might say. It's curious how quickly you've established yourself here." For a moment, something flashed in Ayoka's eyes, a hint of steel beneath the charm, but it was gone so quickly that Mama Folake almost believed she had imagined it. "Fortune smiles on those who work hard," Ayoka replied smoothly. "And I have worked very hard indeed." Before Mama Folake could respond, a commotion erupted from a nearby stall. A duke, a longtime trader known for her hot peppers and fiery temper, was berating a customer. "What do you mean you'd rather buy from Ayoka?" A duke's voice rang out, sharp with indignation. "My peppers have fed this village for 20 years, and now you say hers are better." The customer, a young man who looked thoroughly uncomfortable, stammered out a response. "It's just, there's something about her peppers, they're spicier somehow, and when I eat them it's like I can taste the very essence of fire itself." A duke's face contorted with rage and disbelief. She snatched up a handful of her own peppers and thrust them at the young man. "Taste these. Tell me they're not good enough for you." But the damage was done. Other customers, drawn by the spectacle, were already drifting towards Ayoka's stall, murmuring among themselves about the supposedly magical qualities of her goods. Mama Folake watched this unfold with a heavy heart. She had known a duke for decades, had seen her children grow up and start families of their own. To see her livelihood threatened so suddenly and completely was deeply troubling. As the day wore on, similar scenes played out across the marketplace. Longtime customers abandoned their usual traders in favor of Ayoka's wares. The air grew thick with tension, punctuated by outbursts of anger and despair from those whose businesses were suffering. Through it all, Ayoka maintained her serene demeanor, graciously accepting the influx of customers while seemingly oblivious to the turmoil she was causing. But in quiet moments when she thought no one was watching, a satisfied smirk would cross her face, a brief glimpse of the ambition that drove her. That night, as the market closed and the traders packed up their unsold goods, far too many, in most cases Mama Folake called a meeting. In the cool evening air, beneath the spreading branches of the old baobab tree that stood at the center of the marketplace, the women gathered. Their faces were etched with worry and fatigue, their voices hushed but urgent as they discussed the day's events. Ayoka, notably, was not invited to this gathering. Something must be done, a duke insisted, her earlier rage now simmering into a determined resolve. "This cannot continue. She will drive us all out of business at this rate." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the group. Mama Folake held up a hand for silence, and the woman quieted, looking to her for guidance. "We must be careful," Mama Folake cautioned. "We have no proof that Ayoka has done anything wrong. Her success, however sudden, could be just that success." "But it's not natural," another woman, Bisi, interjected. "The way people flock to her stall, the way they speak of her goods, it's as if they're under a spell." The word spell hung in the air, heavy with implication. In Ilupeju, as in many villages, belief in the supernatural was a part of daily life. The idea that Ayoka might be using mystical means to achieve her success was not as far-fetched as it might have been elsewhere. "If it is a spell," Mama Folake said slowly, "then we must tread carefully indeed. Such power is not to be taken lightly." As the women continued to debate, none of them noticed the small lizard that clung to the trunk of the baobab, its eyes unnaturally focused on their gathering. And none of them saw how, when the meeting concluded, the lizard scurried away with unnatural speed, heading towards the outskirts of the village where Ayoka's hut stood in the gathering darkness. In her hut, Ayoka sat before a small mirror, slowly combing her hair. As the lizard slipped through a crack in the wall, she smiled, not turning around. So she said softly, "They begin to suspect. Good. Let them wonder. Let them worry. It will make my triumph all the sweeter." She opened the carved box that held her amulet, lifting the charm to catch the lamplight. The cowrie shell gleamed, and within its depths, something seemed to move, as if alive. Soon, Ayoka whispered to the charm, "Soon they will all bow before me, and this village will be just the beginning." Outside, the night grew deeper, and the spirits of the land watched and waited, their unease growing with each passing moment. The balance was shifting, and with it, the fate of Ilupeju hung in the balance. As the village of Ilupeju settled into an uneasy sleep, the night came alive with whispers. In the narrow spaces between huts, in the rustling leaves of the baobab trees, in the soft murmur of the wind across the savanna, secrets and suspicions danced on the air like motes of dust in a shaft of moonlight. Ayoka, ever attuned to the undercurrents of power that flowed through the village, sat cross-legged on the packed earth floor of her hut. The amulet lay before her, the cowrie shell gleaming with an inner light that seemed to pulse in time with her heartbeat. Her eyes, half closed in concentration, reflected that same ethereal glow. "Show me," she whispered to the charm, her voice barely audible even in the silence of her hut. "Show me their fears, their desires, their weaknesses." The air around her shimmered, and in her mind's eye, Ayoka saw the villagers of Ilupeju as they truly were. She saw a duke, the pepper seller, tossing and turning in her sleep, her dreams filled with visions of withered crops and empty market stalls. She saw Bisi, whose textiles had once been the pride of the village, sitting up late into the night, desperately trying to weave patterns as captivating as those that adorned Ayoka's goods. But it was the image of Mama Folake that held Ayoka's attention the longest. The old woman sat awake, her wise eyes staring into the embers of a dying fire, her thoughts a turmoil of concern for her fellow traders and deep, gnawing suspicion about the newcomer who had so quickly upended the delicate balance of village life. Ayoka's lips curved into a smile that held no warmth. "Oh, Mama Folake," she murmured, "you are right to worry, but you cannot begin to imagine the extent of what is to come." As Ayoka delved deeper into the secrets revealed by her charm, she failed to notice the small, dark shape that flitted across her windowsill. It was a nightjar, a bird known for its nocturnal habits and its association with the spirit world. Its eyes, unusually bright and aware, fixed on the scene within the hut. The nightjar was more than it appeared. It was a vessel, a physical form temporarily inhabited by one of the ancient spirits that watched over Ilupeju. The spirit had taken this shape to observe Ayoka more closely, drawn by the disturbance in the natural order that her presence created. As it watched, the spirit felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cool night air. The power that Ayoka wielded was old and dangerous, a force that should not be in the hands of one so consumed by ambition and greed. The spirit knew that action would need to be taken, but it also knew the limits of its own influence. Direct intervention was forbidden. The spirits could guide and warn, but the choices must ultimately be made by mortals themselves. With a soft rustle of feathers, the nightjar took flight, winging its way towards the center of the village. It had much to report to its fellow spirits, and decisions would need to be made about how best to counter the threat that Ayoka posed. Meanwhile, in the humble hut that she called home, Mama Folake stirred from her contemplation of the fire. Something had caught her attention, a sound just on the edge of hearing, like the whisper of a familiar voice carried on the wind. She rose, joints creaking in protest, and made her way to the door of her hut. Outside, the village was bathed in moonlight, the familiar contours of huts and paths transformed into a silvery landscape that seemed almost otherworldly. Mama Folake's eyes, still sharp despite her years, scanned the area, seeking the source of the sound that had drawn her from her musings. There a movement in the shadows cast by the great baobab tree. Mama Folake squinted, trying to make out the shape. For a moment she could have sworn she saw the outline of a person, tall and regal, with eyes that gleamed like stars. But when she blinked, the figure was gone, leaving her to wonder if it had been nothing more than a trick of the light and her own overtired mind. As she turned to go back inside, a soft breeze caressed Mama Folake's cheek, and with it came words, barely audible but unmistakable. Be watchful, daughter of the land. The old ways are stirring, and with them comes both danger and hope. Mama Folake froze, her heart racing. She knew those words, had heard them in stories passed down through generations. They were the words of the ancestors, spoken only in times of great change or peril. That she should hear them now, on this night of all nights, sent a shiver down her spine that had nothing to do with the cool air. Gathering her courage, Mama Folake spoke into the night. I hear you, ancestors. Guide me. What must I do? But the night remained silent, offering no further wisdom. Mama Folake stood for a long moment, waiting, but only the usual sounds of the sleeping village reached her ears. With a heavy sigh, she retreated back into her hut, her mind whirling with questions and half-formed plans. As the first light of dawn began to paint the eastern sky, Mama Folake made a decision. She could not stand idly by while Ayoka's influence grew unchecked. It was time to seek help from one who might understand the forces at work, the village's own native doctor, Babatund. The sun had barely cleared the horizon when Mama Folake set out for Babatund's compound, located on the outskirts of Ilupeju. The morning air was crisp, heavy with dew, and the promise of another sweltering day. As she walked, Mama Folake's mind raced, trying to make sense of the events of the past weeks and the strange occurrences of the night before. Babatund's home was easy to spot, even from a distance. Unlike the other huts in the village, his was surrounded by a fence made of intricately carved wooden posts, each one depicting spirits and animals sacred to the old ways. The air around the compound seemed different, too thicker somehow, as if the boundary between the physical world and the spirit realm was thinner here. As Mama Folake approached the gate, it swung open of its own accord. She hesitated for just a moment before stepping through, knowing that once she entered Babatund's domain, there was no turning back from the path she had chosen. The interior of the compound was a riot of colors and scents. Herbs of all kinds hung from rafters to dry, their aromas mingling in the air. Fetishes and charms dangled from trees, clicking softly in the morning breeze. And there, seated on a low stool in the center of it all, was Babatund himself. The native doctor was an imposing figure, tall and lean, with skin the color of rich earth and eyes that seemed to hold the wisdom of ages. He wore a simple robe adorned with cowrie shells and feathers, and in his hand he held a gnarled staff topped with a carved wooden bird. Mama Folake, Babatund said, his voice deep and resonant. I have been expecting you. Mama Folake bowed slightly, a gesture of respect for the doctor's position and power. Babatunde, I come seeking your wisdom. Our village faces a threat, one that I fear may be beyond my understanding. Babatunde nodded slowly, his expression grave. You speak of the newcomer, Ayoka? I have felt the disturbance she brings, seen the shadows that gather in her wake. Then you know why I'm here, Mama Folake said, relief evident in her voice. What can be done? How can we protect our people, our way of life? Babatund rose from his stool, his movements fluid despite his apparent age. He walked to a small fire pit where a pot of water simmered, various herbs and roots floating on its surface. As he stirred the concoction, he spoke. The power Ayoka wields is ancient and dangerous. It is a magic born of greed and ambition, one that consumes as much as it gives. He turned to face Mama Folake, his eyes piercing. But it is not unbeatable. Every charm has its counter, every spell is undone. Hope flared in Mama Folake's chest. Will you help us then? Can you create a charm to protect the village? Babatunde's laugh was like the rumble of distant thunder. Create a charm? No, Mama Folake. That is not the way. To fight fire with fire would only engulf us all. No, the answer lies not in more magic but in the strength of the people themselves. Confusion furrowed Mama Folake's brow. I don't understand. How can we fight against such power without magic of our own? Ayoka's power comes from division, from the jealousy and fear she sows among the people. Unite them, remind them of the bonds that have held Ilupeju together for generations, and her influence will wane. As Babatunde spoke, he ladled some of the simmering liquid into a small clay cup. He offered it to Mama Folake, who took it hesitantly. Drink, he instructed. It will clear your mind and strengthen your spirit for the task ahead. Mama Folake raised the cup to her lips, the steam carrying a complex aroma of herbs and spices she couldn't quite identify. As she drank, warmth spread through her body, and with it came a clarity of thought she hadn't experienced in years. There is one more thing you should know, Babatunde said as Mama Folake finished the drink. Ayoka's power, great as it is not entirely her own. She is but a vessel, a channel for forces she barely understands. The true source of her abilities lies in the amulet she wears. Mama Folake's eyes widened. The cowrie shell on the leather cord? I've seen her touch it often, almost unconsciously. Babatunde nodded. That amulet is the key. If it can be removed, Ayoka's influence over the village will be broken. But be warned, it will not give up its power easily, and Ayoka will fight with everything she has to keep it. How can we hope to get close enough to take it? Mama Folake asked, her earlier hope fading in the face of this seemingly impossible task. That, my friend, is where the strength of your people will be tested. Ayoka's power isolates her, makes her believe she stands apart and above others, but true strength comes from community, from the bonds between people. Foster those bonds, remind the villagers of what truly matters, and a way will present itself. As Mama Folake prepared to leave, feeling both enlightened and burdened by the knowledge she had gained, Babatunde placed a hand on her shoulder. Remember, Mama Folake, the spirits of the land are with you. They cannot intervene directly, but they will guide those who are open to their wisdom. Watch for their signs, listen for their whispers, and above all, have faith in the people of Ilupeju. With those final words of encouragement, Mama Folake left Babatunde's compound, her mind already racing with plans. As she walked back towards the village, she failed to notice the nightjar perched on one of the carved posts of Babatunde's fence, its unnaturally bright eyes following her progress. The spirit inhabiting the bird nodded in satisfaction. The pieces were falling into place. Now it was up to Mama Folake and the people of Ilupeju to write the next chapter in this unfolding drama. As Mama Folake made her way back to the heart of Ilupeju, the village was already stirring to life. Women balanced water jugs on their heads as they returned from the communal well, children chased each other through the narrow paths between huts, and the air was filled with the mingled scents of cooking fires and the day's first meals. But beneath this veneer of normalcy, Mama Folake could sense an undercurrent of tension. Conversations hushed as she passed, only to resume in urgent whispers once she was out of earshot. Glances darted nervously towards the section of the village where Ayoka had taken up residence. It was clear that the unease that had gripped Mama Folake was not hers alone. Reaching the central marketplace, Mama Folake was struck by how different it looked in the early morning light. Stalls that had once been bursting with goods now seemed sparse, their owners arranging and rearranging their meager offerings in an attempt to make them appear more abundant. The vibrant energy that had always characterized the market was muted, replaced by a palpable air of defeat. It was here, among the people she had known and worked alongside for decades, that Mama Folake decided to make her stand. "Friends," she called out, her voice carrying across the marketplace. "Fellow traders of Ilupeju, I ask for a moment of your time." Curious faces turned towards her, some wary, others hopeful. Mama Folake took a deep breath, drawing strength from the wisdom Babatunde had shared and the connection she felt to the very earth beneath her feet. We have all seen the changes that have come to our village in recent weeks, she began. We have watched as our businesses have suffered, as the bonds between us have been strained. But I stand before you today to say that it does not have to be this way. Murmurs rippled through the gathering crowd. Emboldened, Mama Folake continued. Ilupeju has stood for generations, not because of any one person's success, but because of the strength we find in each other. We have weathered droughts and floods, celebrated harvests and births, mourned losses and comforted each other in times of sorrow. It is these connections, this sense of community, that has always been our true wealth. As she spoke, Mama Folake could see a change coming over the faces of those listening. The defeat and resignation that had clouded their eyes began to give way to something else, a rekindling of pride, a spark of defiance. I propose that we return to our roots, Mama Folake declared. Let us organize a festival, a celebration of all that makes Ilupeju unique. Each of us will contribute what we can, our goods, our skills, our stories. We will remind ourselves and each other of the strength we possess when we stand together. The idea took hold like wildfire. Voices that had been hushed now rose in excitement, suggesting ideas for the festival, volunteering to take on various tasks. The marketplace, so recently a place of despair, now hummed with renewed energy and purpose. As the discussions continued, a duke, the pepper seller who had been one of the most vocal critics of Ayoka, approached Mama Folake. It's a good idea, a duke admitted, her earlier anger tempered by a grudging respect. But what about Ayoka? Won't she just use the festival to draw more attention to herself, to sell more of her special goods? Mama Folake smiled, a glint of mischief in her eyes. That, my friend, is exactly what we're counting on. Sometimes, to catch a fish, you must first stir up the waters. A duke's eyes widened as understanding dawned. You have a plan. The beginnings of one, Mama Folake confirmed. But its success will depend on all of us working together. Are you with me? A duke's response was to clasp Mama Folake's hand firmly in her own. To the end, she declared. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, word of the upcoming festival spread through Ilupeju like a joyous wildfire. Children ran from house to house, sharing the news with breathless excitement. Women gathered in small groups, already planning the dishes they would prepare. Men discussed the logistics of setting up the festival grounds, debating the best location and how to accommodate the expected crowd. In her hut on the outskirts of the village, Ayoka sat before her mirror, carefully applying kohl around her eyes. The excited voices carried to her on the breeze, and a slow smile spread across her face. A festival, she mused, fingering the Cowrie shell amulet that hung around her neck. How quaint, and how perfect for my plans. The amulet pulsed warmly against her skin, as if in agreement. Ayoka's smile widened, showing teeth that seemed just a bit too sharp in the dimness of her hut. Oh yes, she purred. Let them have their little celebration. When it's over, they'll be begging to give me control of the entire marketplace. As Ayoka began to plan how she would use the festival to further cement her power over Ilupeju, she remained oblivious to the small lizard that clung to the wall of her hut, its eyes unnaturally focused and alert. The spirit inhabiting the creature had heard every word, and as it scurried away to report back to its fellows, a sense of urgency filled its tiny form. The stage was set. The festival would be more than a celebration, it would be a battleground where the fate of Ilupeju would be decided. And as the sun reached its zenith, casting short shadows across the village, both sides began to prepare for the confrontation to come. The days leading up to the festival were a whirlwind of activity in Ilupeju. Every available space in the village buzzed with preparation, from the central marketplace to the smallest backyard. The air was filled with the sounds of hammering as stalls were repaired and decorated, the sizzle of oil as women tested recipes for the feast to come, and the constant chatter of excited voices discussing plans and possibilities. Mama Folake found herself at the center of it all, coordinating efforts and mediating the occasional dispute. But more than that, she watched and listened, taking note of how the preparations were bringing the villagers together in ways she hadn't seen in years. She saw a duke, the pepper seller, teaching a group of young girls the secret to her famous spice blend, passing on knowledge that had been in her family for generations. Nearby, Baisi the textile weaver worked alongside other craftswomen, their looms clacking in unison as they created banners and decorations for the festival grounds. Even those who had been most affected by Ayoka's arrival found new purpose in the preparations, their earlier despair replaced by determination and a cautious hope. As she moved through the village, Mama Folake kept a watchful eye out for signs from the spirits, remembering Babatunda's words. And indeed, there were moments when she felt their presence, a sudden breeze carrying the scent of rare flowers, the cry of a bird that seemed to form words just on the edge of understanding, shadows that moved in ways that didn't quite match the objects casting them. These signs both reassured and unsettled her. They were a reminder that forces beyond human understanding were at work, and that the coming confrontation with Ayoka would have consequences that reached far beyond the borders of Ilupeju. On the evening of the third day of preparations, as the sun began to set, painting the sky in vibrant oranges and purples, Mama Folake decided to seek guidance once more. She made her way to the ancient baobab tree that stood at the heart of the village, its massive trunk and spreading branches a symbol of Ilupeju's endurance through countless seasons. As she approached the tree, Mama Folake was struck by how quiet it suddenly became. The constant background noise of the village children playing, women chatting, men discussing the day's work all faded away, replaced by a silence so profound it seemed to press against her eardrums. "Ancestors," Mama Folake whispered, placing a hand on the rough bark of the baobab. "I come seeking your wisdom. The path ahead is unclear, and I fear the consequences if we fail." For a long moment there was no response. Then, slowly, Mama Folake became aware of a vibration beneath her palm. It grew stronger, spreading up her arm and through her body until she felt as though she was at the center of a great, silent drum. And with the vibration came images, flashing through her mind with dizzying speed. A cowrie shell, gleaming with an inner light, suspended over a pit of writhing shadows. Ayoka, her eyes glowing with an unnatural fire, standing atop a pyramid of cowering villagers. The marketplace is in flames, smoke rising to blot out the sun. And finally, a vision of Ilupeju as it could be prosperous, united, with Ayoka nowhere in sight. As quickly as they had come, the images faded, leaving Mama Folake gasping and leaning heavily against the baobab for support. The message was clear: the stakes were even higher than she had imagined, and the outcome was far from certain. But along with this sobering knowledge came a surge of determination. The ancestors had shown her both the danger and the possibility. It was up to all of them to make the right choices and set Ilupeju on the path to that brighter future. As Mama Folake made her way back to the village center, her mind was clearer than it had been in days. She knew now that the festival would be more than just a celebration or even a show of unity. It would be a battleground where the very soul of Ilupeju would be at stake. Meanwhile, in her hut on the outskirts of the village, Ayoka was making her own preparations. The excited chatter about the festival had reached her ears, and she saw in it an opportunity to consolidate her power once and for all. Seated cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by candles that cast flickering shadows on the walls, Ayoka held her amulet before her. The cowrie shell seemed to pulse with an inner light, casting an eerie glow over her features. Great spirits of ambition and desire, she intoned, her voice low and intense. "I call upon you now. Strengthen my charm, sharpen my will. Let all who see me at the festival fall under my spell, unable to resist the allure of my goods, the power of my words." As she spoke, the candlelight dimmed, as if the flames themselves were cowering in the presence of the forces Ayoka was invoking. The air in the hut grew thick and heavy, charged with an energy that made the hairs on the back of her neck stand on end. The cowrie shell amulet began to spin slowly in the air before her, defying gravity. Faster and faster it whirled, until it was nothing but a blur of motion. Then, with a sound like a thunderclap, it fell back into Ayoka's waiting palm. She gasped at the sensation. The amulet was hot to the touch, almost painfully so, but she didn't let go. She could feel the power coursing through it, into her, filling her with a confidence that bordered on euphoria. "Yes," she whispered, a smile spreading across her face. "This is what I've been waiting for. With this, no one will be able to stand against me. Ilupeju will be mine, and it will be just the beginning." As Ayoka reveled in her newfound power, she failed to notice the small gecko clinging to the wall of her hut, its eyes unnaturally bright and alert. The spirit inhabiting the creature had witnessed the entire ritual, and it trembled with the implications of what it had seen. Silently, the gecko slipped out through a crack in the wall, racing towards the village center. It had to warn the other spirits, had to find a way to alert Mama Folake and the others. The stakes had just been raised exponentially, and time was running out. The night before the festival, a palpable tension hung over Ilupeju. The usual evening sounds, crickets chirping, the distant lowing of cattle, the murmur of families gathering for their evening meals, all seemed muted, as if the village itself was holding its breath in anticipation of what was to come. In homes throughout Ilupeju, final preparations were being made. Women put the finishing touches on colorful outfits, men checked and rechecked the stalls and booths that had been set up in the village square, and children whispered excitedly to each other about the games and treats they were looking forward to. But beneath the veneer of festive preparation, an undercurrent of anxiety ran through the village. Those who had been most affected by Ayoka's rise to prominence found themselves torn between hope that the festival would mark a return to the old ways and fear that it would only serve to cement her power further. Mama Folake, for her part, spent the evening moving from house to house, offering words of encouragement and last-minute advice. Her calm demeanor and unwavering confidence did much to bolster the spirits of those she visited. "Remember," she told a group of traders as they made final adjustments to their wares, "our strength lies in our unity. Ayoka may have her charms, but we have something far more powerful, the bonds of community that have held Ilupeju together for generations." As night deepened, Mama Folake made her way to the village square. The usually open space had been transformed. Colorful banners fluttered in the gentle breeze, strung between poles and the branches of trees. Stalls and booths lined the perimeter, each one a testament to the skill and creativity of Ilupeju's craftspeople. At the center stood a large open area where performances would take place, ringed by benches made from polished logs. Mama Folake paused, taking in the sight. In the moonlight, with the silver-edged shadows playing across the scene, it looked almost magical. For a moment, she allowed herself to feel a surge of pride in what they had accomplished. But as she turned to head home for a few hours of rest, a movement at the edge of the square caught her eye. There, half hidden in the shadows between two stalls, stood a figure that seemed to shimmer and shift in the moonlight. Mama Folake's breath caught in her throat. She blinked, certain that her tired eyes were playing tricks on her. But when she looked again, the figure was still there. As she watched, it raised a hand in what seemed to be a gesture of both greeting and warning. Without thinking, Mama Folake took a step towards the apparition. But in that instant, a cloud passed over the moon, plunging the square into momentary darkness. When the light returned, the figure was gone. Heart pounding, Mama Folake hurried to the spot where she had seen the figure. There was no sign that anyone had been there, but as she turned to leave, something on the ground caught her eye. Bending down, she found a single cowrie shell, larger and more intricately patterned than any she had seen before. As she picked it up, a voice seemed to whisper in her ear, so faint she almost thought she had imagined it. "The key lies in the heart's true desire. What is freely given cannot be taken." Clutching the cowrie shell tightly, Mama Folake hurried home, her mind racing. She knew that sleep would be elusive tonight, but she also knew that she would need all her strength for the challenges that lay ahead. Meanwhile, in her hut, Ayoka too was preparing for the festival, but in a very different way. She stood before a small altar, the cowrie shell amulet hanging from her neck and glowing with an eerie light. Around her, candles flickered, their flames dancing in patterns that seemed to defy the laws of nature. "Tomorrow," she murmured, her eyes gleaming with an unnatural fire, "tomorrow, Ilupeju falls, and from its ashes my empire will rise." As she spoke, the shadows in the corners of the hut seemed to deepen and writhe, as if stirred by her words. The air grew thick and heavy, charged with a power that was palpable. Outside, unseen by either Ayoka or the villagers now settling into an uneasy sleep, the spirits of the land gathered. They took the forms of animals and birds, of whispers on the wind and ripples in still water. They could not intervene directly in the events to come, bound as they were by ancient laws. But they could watch and wait and hope that the people of Ilupeju would find the strength and wisdom to face the trial that awaited them. As the first light of dawn began to paint the eastern sky, both Ayoka and Mama Folake emerged from their respective dwellings. They stood for a moment, each woman framed in her doorway, as if sensing the presence of the other across the village. The festival was about to begin, and with it, the battle for the soul of Ilupeju. The air itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see what the new day would bring. The rising sun painted the sky in hues of gold and pink as Ilupeju stirred to life on the day of the festival. The air was filled with a mixture of excitement and tension, like the moments before a thunderstorm breaks. Villagers emerged from their homes dressed in their finest clothes, a riot of colors and patterns that reflected the vibrancy of their community. In the village square, final preparations were underway. Stall owners arranged their wares with meticulous care, each item placed just so to catch the eye of potential buyers. The aroma of cooking food wafted through the air as women tended to large pots bubbling over open fires, preparing the feast that would be shared later in the day. Mama Folake stood at the entrance to the square, greeting people as they arrived. She wore a dress of deep blue, adorned with intricate embroidery that sparkled in the morning light. Around her neck hung the cowrie shell she had found the night before, now strung on a simple leather cord. She touched it occasionally, drawing strength from its presence. "Welcome, welcome," she called out, her voice warm and strong. "Today we celebrate all that makes Ilupeju special. Today we remember who we are and the bonds that tie us together." As the square filled with villagers, a sense of community began to build. People who had been distant in recent weeks now greeted each other warmly, sharing smiles and excited chatter about the day ahead. Children darted between the stalls, their laughter ringing out above the general hubbub. But even as the festive atmosphere grew, there was an undercurrent of anticipation. Eyes kept darting to the path that led from Ayoka's hut, wondering when she would make her appearance and what it would mean for the celebration. They didn't have to wait long. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, a hush fell over the crowd. Ayoka was approaching. She walked with the grace of a queen, her head held high, a smile playing at the corners of her lips. Her dress was a marvel, shimmering with threads of gold and silver that caught the light with every movement. But it was the amulet around her neck that drew the eye. The cowrie shell seemed to glow with an inner fire, pulsing in time with her heartbeat. As Ayoka entered the square, the atmosphere changed. It was subtle at first, a catch in someone's breath, a momentary pause in conversation. But as she moved through the crowd, the effect grew stronger. People found themselves drawn to her, their eyes following her every movement. The sounds of the festival seemed to fade into the background, replaced by the soft murmur of Ayoka's voice as she greeted those she passed. Mama Folake watched this display with a mixture of concern and determination. She could feel the power radiating from Ayoka, could see how it affected those around her. But she also noticed something else, a flicker of unease in Ayoka's eyes, quickly masked but undeniably there. It was a reminder that for all her apparent confidence, Ayoka was not infallible. As the morning wore on, the festival hit its stride. Performances began in the center of the square, dancers moving in intricate patterns, drummers setting a rhythm that seemed to pulse through the very ground, storytellers weaving tales that held their audiences spellbound. But even as the celebration continued, a subtle contest was unfolding. Ayoka moved from stall to stall, her charm working its magic. Those who spoke with her found themselves agreeing to purchases they hadn't intended to make, drawn in by the allure of her goods and the power of her words. Mama Folake, seeing this, began to implement the plan she had been formulating since her visit to Babatunde. She moved through the crowd, touching hands, offering words of encouragement, reminding people of their connections to each other and to the village. Where Ayoka sowed division and self-interest, Mama Folake nurtured unity and community. As the sun reached its zenith, casting short shadows across the square, the two women found themselves face to face at last. The crowd around them quieted, sensing the importance of the moment. "Ayoka," Mama Folake said, her voice carrying clearly across the suddenly silent square, "you have brought much change to Ilupeju in a short time." Ayoka's smile was dazzling, but there was a hardness in her eyes. "Change is the way of the world, Mama Folake. I have simply helped Ilupeju embrace it." "And at what cost?" Mama Folake asked, her hand unconsciously moving to touch the cowrie shell at her throat. What price do we pay for this progress you offer?